final day of our Sales Reimagine, our 3-day revenue excellence summit. Sorry, my name is Eduardo. I am a community events manager at the amazing Modern Sales Pros. And I'm gonna say it again. I know you heard it so many times now, but it's worth repeating because Modern Sales Pros is the biggest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our modern sales pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there. If you're not a member yet and you know you're 100% missing out, but you will receive an invitation right after the summit, and I hope to see you around in one of the amazing events that we have. But for right now, let's talk about our amazing sponsors. The summit would not be possible without them, and they are the companies that you see here in this slide. So kudos to them for making this happen. These amazing organizations are not only sponsoring this specific event, but the full 3 days event and 17 total events of this summit. To learn more about those innovative companies, click on the sponsors booth tab at the top of this event page and check out all the ungated valuable resources that our sponsors have made available just for us this week. And once you're there, like you can find some surprises and some free stuff that if I were you, I would check them out. But here you can see in this slide now how we reimagine sales. And we are in the last day now. This is the second session of the third day. We have two more sessions going, three more sessions going on today. And at the end of the day, we have three amazing in-person events. So don't miss out on that. If you are in New York, Austin, or San Francisco, you should definitely join us in this amazing sponsor in-person events. But for right now, let's focus on this session. I have an agenda right over here. So we are going to go through some housekeeping notes, and then I'm going to pass the mic to the speakers so they can introduce themselves and start the discussion. So here are some quick housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded. We cannot leave this amazing content just go out in the deep web. So it will be available in the MSP website right after this panel, and you will receive a follow-up email with links for you to check all the information that you need. Second, GoCast is an amazing platform. We have so many different things that you can do in here. So familiarize yourself with GoCast. And if you have questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A function. It's right in this right, I think it's in the right hand side panel. Use the Q&A function and chat with your peers in here. It's a great opportunity for you to network and give us your point of views. We want to hear from you too. At the end of the day, Modern Sales Pros is a community, so we want to hear from you because you are the most important part of our work. And lastly, let's see the amazing panelists that we have today. We have Pete and John. They're going to have an amazing conversation right now. And I'm going to pass the mic to Pete, and then we can start having some fun. I'll be back later for some outro notes, but for now, Pete, you can take it over.
Okay, wonderful. Hey everyone, thank you. Okay, wonderful. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us with this absolutely fantastic fireside chat that we're hosting here today. I couldn't be more excited with our guest, John here, who's joining us from, John, are you in Boston today or are you in Naples today?
I'm in Boston. Boston, the great city of Boston.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, I'm so excited for us to chat through a number of really exciting topics that John covers in his book, The Qualified Sales Leader, kind of the culmination of a pretty amazing career that's like still obviously kicking there. Why don't we go ahead and we can get into some introductions here. And cool. So just really quick for me, I'm Pete Kazanji. I am the co-founder of Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales managers, AE, SDR, AM, CSM managers use metrics to improve rep and team performance. This is my second software company. My prior software company, TalentBin, was acquired by Monster Worldwide, Boston company there, John. And then after TalentBin was acquired by Monster in 2014, I wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales. So when John was writing, or when John wrote his book, I had to, email him immediately and say like, "Oh my gosh, John, your book was so great. It was awesome. Can I send you mine? It has, it's the culmination of way less experience than yours." But it was absolutely fantastic. And I'll give a little bit of introduction here about John. Probably people who are watching us today probably already know him, because when I sent out the initial outreach about this event, the number of replies I had coming back being like, "That's awesome, say hi to John for me," was like astronomical. So John's been a long time CRO for a number of different companies, and he's also one of the fathers of the Matic sales methodology. Probably most famously, John was the CRO at Parametric Technology Corporation, PTC, for those who are in the know. Probably having spawned the largest and most muscular like sales leadership coaching tree in the world. Not probably, obviously, like hands down the most substantial, impressive, data-driven and operationally excellent coaching tree, the sales leadership coaching tree. You see the fingerprints all over all sorts of amazing organizations, from MongoDB to Snowflake to Salesforce. The list goes on and on and on and on. If you meet a sales leader and you're like, "Man, this person's really got their act together," go to their LinkedIn profile and scroll down. You scroll a little bit and then you'll be like, "Oh, PTC, there it is, makes sense." He's been a number of other organizations as well, Blade Logic, BMC, the list kind of goes on, and now he serves on a bunch of boards as well, MongoDB, and I don't know if anyone's heard of Snowflake, little company that's like done a pretty good job at revolutionizing cloud data warehouses. So John, really awesome to have you here today. Did I miss anything? Ready to do an okay job there?
You did great, Pete. Glad to be
Thanks,
here.
Coach.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. And so I think in terms of one of the things that we're going to be giving away to our audience here, we're going to go ahead and drop this link. We'd love to send you a copy of John's book if you haven't read it. Even if you have read it, like, grab another one, give it to somebody else as well, because obviously the world needs more and better sales leadership, and John's book is a really fantastic encapsulation of just tons and tons and tons of lessons there. We'll also send you a nice Yeti as well there, so go ahead and click on that link and you can kind of register for that information. And then otherwise, I think we're ready to rock here. So John, I think that probably the thing that I would love for everyone to kind of get started with here is like, maybe you could just give us the story of like where Matic came from at PTC to kind of like set the stage for everybody.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't something that was just like invented overnight. It was something that was came out of a process or an invention of necessity, let's say. So
sure.
When I started at PTC, the software didn't work. And back then, you'd have what they called rapid development, and we did that meant a new release every 6 months. That's not that long ago. It's 20 years ago.
Rapid.
But rapid was every 6 months you did a major release, and that was fast. That was really fast.
Well, then it was.
And it's not that long ago, really. So, but now, I mean, you could do a new release. You could do new point releases every day, every hour, especially when you're attached to the cloud. So what happened is it didn't work for the first 3.5 years because it didn't work until Rev 7. So up until Rev 7, we were pot and pan salespeople, vacuum cleaner salespeople, Cutco knife salespeople, in the sense that there was no sales process. There was basically get in the door through a lot of
figure it out.
And then, no, we didn't have slides or anything. We would write down 5 of our, what we thought were differentiators at the time. And really they were just feature function differentiators, but they were different. And at the time, just so everybody knows, we were selling CAD systems. So you could see, your computer in 3 dimensions, it exploded views, you knew the center of gravity, moments of inertia, everything. So So that's what we were selling. So
fun fact, my dad's aerospace company, my dad's also an entrepreneur, except back in the 80s, you would do in Southern California, you would do aerospace companies as opposed to doing SaaS companies. And so they were a PTC users.
Yeah, there you go. So, the software didn't work. So the sales process was get in there, grab a marker from their whiteboard and write down our 5 key differentiators. Tell everybody in the audience that we're going to give them a demonstration of the product, which was highly choreographed. We'd read out the 5 differentiators. Yep. And because the software didn't work, and at that time you were selling off of desktop computers, desktop computers for people that are younger in the audience, it was basically a box, maybe 4 or 5 inches high, and a pretty heavy monitor sitting on the top. So we would tell the SE, technical person, to wrap the power cord around their leg. And if anything went haywire while we were giving the demo, because normally I would stand next to and we had all the reps stand next to the application engineer so we could see their eyes and see whether or not something was going haywire while we watched the audience. And if something's going haywire, they would just lift their leg up and pull the power cord, and then the thing would shut down. And then, I'd have to do a little tap dance and tell the audience a little story.
Oh man, Bob. Jeez. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, had no idea how that happened, but let's reboot. So, but then, they would say, okay, well, because the software was so highly choreographed, the demo was just perfect. And it did highlight those 5 differentiators. People would be intrigued and they'd say, hey, John, can we get, can we do a benchmark? No. Can we do a POC? No. Can we get a loaner? No. Can we do a rental? No. Can we lease it? No. What can we do? You could buy it. So then the tension got really, high in the air, and you could basically cut the air with a knife, right? So, and we didn't really want to leave, just like a pot and pan salesperson, until we basically had a deal. So in some ways, that's where PTC probably got, if it has a bad reputation, that's where it got its bad reputation, because there was nothing else we could do as salespeople. We had to get the order, and the software.
Well, I think a lot of folks in the audience, I hope not too many people in the audience will identify with this, but it turns out that you guys were selling pre-product market fit, and
yes.
And that's a tough spot to be as a seller. Now, yes. It's a super valuable spot to be for the business. It sucks for the seller, good for the business insofar as this, because then the seller takes that information and is bringing it back into the organization and ideally helping the organization get better over time. But
well, that we did also, because a lot of times I'd call up the head of development at the time was a craggy old British guy named Michael Payne. Mike smoked a lot of cigarettes. His tips of his fingers were yellow. He had a little yellow thing on his lip. And every time I would call in, he could see that it was me calling. He'd pick up the phone. I'd say, hey, Mike, it's John McMahon calling. Oh, Mr. McMahon, what have you sold today that we don't have? And I'd say, but Mike, I got the deal. So you got to build it because these people are buying. So then what happened was on Rev 7, the product started to work. But we were going
because of all that wonderful product feedback and sold vaporware that then had to be delivered upon.
That's true. And talk about hardening you as a salesperson. It definitely hardened you. 3.5 years of that. So Rev 7 product started to work, but we were going up against billion-dollar competitors. At that time, there was a company called Computer Vision was $1 billion. There was a company called SDRC was public. There was a company called Unigraphics that Pete was actually out of McDonnell Douglas. They were backed by McDonnell Douglas, big aircraft manufacturer at the time. So what we knew is, okay, if we're going to sell this product, then we have to be able to control what they're buying. Because if they're not buying what we have, then they're buying something else. So how do we do that? Well, we have to basically really understand what the criteria is. What's the decision criteria? And then we had to basically frame that decision criteria to make sure that it didn't move. Because if we said, okay, we framed the decision criteria, we boxed it in, let's do the benchmark or the POC, it had to be nailed so that they were buying what we were selling and we knew we would win. If it was anything outside of that scope, then we would basically say, we're pulling out, we're leaving. And again, that's where PTC sometimes got a bad rap, they say, hey, we want to test your software and you're not letting us test your software. We'll say, because you're not buying what we're selling. So we're going to go.
Exactly.
Then what we noticed is sometimes you thought you controlled the criteria and had it nailed with whoever your coach or potential champion was. And then somebody also in the organization would basically start to change the process. So they would sometimes if we won, they'd even make us do another like POC and test the product again where they change the rules. So then we started to think like, we can't control this decision criteria. We can't control this decision process by ourselves. You know, we need somebody that's stronger than the people that we're calling on. Every once in a while, we're finding these people that can help us control the criteria and control every step of the process. But those people seem different than some of the people that we think are going to help us, but never help us. And that's
more of those guys.
Those guys are champions. Yeah.
We need more of those folks.
We found out that there was a big difference between coaches and champions, and we can come back to this.
Yeah.
But so then we would go find who those people in the organization were that had technical respect or political power. So they had power to help control the room when we weren't around and help control the criteria and every step of the process. So then we started seeking out champions in every organization, and we started winning more and more deals. And then, as you know, for people that don't know PTC, we were doubling every year, sometimes in the beginning tripling. So then what happened is we said, hey, we got to try to start to get these bigger deals. Now, how do we get these bigger deals? And a lot of times in these organizations, there was a director of CAD, especially in the big organizations. So you would think, hey, I'm selling CAD, so let me go over to this director of CAD. But you couldn't be more wrong, because if you talk about pain, if I sell the CAD direct, because everybody had CAD systems, so it was a religious sale in the sense that if they had 500 engineers, they all had a license of some CAD system. So now if I'm going to come in and I'm going to sell my software, I'm going to create pain for this CAD director. They're not going home at 5 o'clock at night anymore. No. They're going to have to worry about training the engineers, product problems, software, bugs, all that type of stuff. So we found out that the CAD director kind of was always shooing us off, saying, it's a leapfrog game, John. You guys are ahead now, but somebody might my installed competitor, they'll be ahead 6 months from now. So then we said, okay, let's go get who really cares about time to market, who cares about engineering productivity, engineering costs. Hey, that's the economic buyer. That's somebody that's way up high. That's either the VP of engineering in most organizations, or in small companies could be the CEO themselves. Let's go talk to those people. Well, when we would go and talk to those people initially, and we started talking about our 5 key differentiators and features and functions, hey, I have a place for you guys. It's 5 layers down.
The CAD.
It's called the CAD director. Shit.
Oh, no.
So we're in this like do loop. How do we get out of this thing? Well, when we go in and talk to this guy from now on, this economic buyer, we know we have to speak in a different language. So that's the guy that we found out has control, discretionary control over the budget. They can decide to buy 5,000 Apple laptops or buy all new CAD systems for the engineers. Okay, when we get up there, never mention the word CAD and only speak in terms of engineering productivity, engineering costs, time to market, market share, that type of stuff, McKinsey studies, all that stuff. So then that resonated with those guys, but those guys were like, okay, great, but prove it to me. Prove it. So then we had to go and do these benchmarks where we basically had to not just do a benchmark anymore, but find out the before scenario. What is their current state? And where are the pains in their process? Identify those pains in the process. And in simple terms, that's the I, identify the pains and problems or the initiatives. And then the metrics are basically quantify that pain. So we would now have the before scenario or the current state. And then we do a POC and have the future state. And we do the comparison, build a cost justification along with basically a business proposal with the before and after state, and now go up to the economic buyer along with the champion, who is our sponsor. But boom, here we go. Okay, Now let's go order 500 of these. Now we started to see the multi-million-dollar deals come in. And then what was happening is, if you were talking to salespeople and saying, tell me about the deal, they tell you about the deal. And then you'd say, okay, what's the competition doing? There is no competition. No, there's always competition. There's the installed vendor. And if they're going to go out and try to pick a new vendor like us, they'll probably, chances are they'll invite some other new vendors in. So who is the competition talking to? Who's their champion? Is their champion more powerful than our champion? Because if they are, we probably have a potential problem. So we wanted to put the extra C in there for, the competition. And then finally, the P was for paper process or signature process, approval process, whatever you want to count it. Who are the people and what are the steps to go get to move from, let's say, a capital appropriations request all the way to a purchase order, right? So those were the steps that we had to basically find out, because what happens if you say, hey, you were told, hey, Pete, you're going to get this deal. It's 4 weeks to go, but you find out the paper process and it's 6 weeks. So now you have a problem, right? Now, if you know that it's 6 weeks, you can call all those people and have your champion call and say, we want to crank this down to 4 weeks. Can you help us move this through the signature process? So that's basically how, MedPick, came about, and it came about really over the course of years. And Matic, the acronym was actually put together by a guy named Jack Napoli, who basically said, took the EDDC that we were using all the time and talking about and put it together in a beautiful acronym called Matic.
I love it. And I love how it was like the sales process itself was iterative, right? Like it added features as you guys kind of took lumps, right? Because that's
the MedPick is really like a qualification methodology to figure out like where you are, in the sales process. So my analogy is, if I'm going to drive from Boston to New York right now, Google Maps tells me the ideal turn-by-turn directions. But if I think that I'm driving and I'm 30 miles outside of Hartford, Connecticut on my way to New York, I might check with my GPS and it says, no, John, you're only 10 miles outside of Hartford. That's the same thing of what a good qualification methodology lays on top of a sales process and tells you, hey, Pete, you think you're in step 3, but you're not. You're in step 2 of stage 2. And here's the information you're missing. And here's the people you need to speak to. Just as if you got off the highway to go get gas and now you're like, well, how do I get back on the highway now, right? So it gets you back like a good GPS, and that's what a good qualification methodology can help you do. But to your point, over time, the sales process changed. If we wanted to go, not be feature function salespeople, but be, real, salespeople that could get up at the executive level and really have meaningful conversations with big deals coming out.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things that are really, because obviously this happened in the 90s, and as you were kind of pointing out earlier, 6-month release cycles. What was the average selling price for, I don't know, when you're maybe not selling 500 of these things, but like maybe when you're selling 50 of these things, we're still probably talking like, $50K, $100K, et cetera, right?
No, I mean, the average seat was probably 25,000. So if you're selling 100 of them, you're selling a pretty good sized deal.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the product kept expanding, so the price started going up too, because maybe you were doing plastics, and you were doing sheet metal, and you were doing wiring, and you're doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So there was a whole bunch of different modules.
Right. So, but I think what's one thing that I've always found, as I've been a kind of a student of sales over the last 10 years or so, is that as the delivery model of of technology changes and becomes more rapid itself, both like the innovation, but also like the deployment methods, because use PTC as an example, and that poor director of CAD that you were like shoving 500 seats of PTC into his lap. You're talking like a big commitment with like a big deployment footprint, et cetera, et cetera. So like the sales process is going to be, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, etc. Whereas nowadays, like things are a lot faster. Not for everything, like you're selling Workday, you're selling Anaplan, etc. But I think the crux of like the things that Matic still talks about around, like, are you identifying the pain? What is the thing that we're actually trying to change in the world? Like, what's the metric that reflects this desirable future state? Who's got the juice to make this actually happen? What is the mechanism by which to facilitate that transaction? All those things still apply. It just happens to be that the tempo is a lot faster. And in this case, it might not necessarily, like the economic buyer might not be SVP of like big deal, et cetera, because we're talking about a smaller transaction size or what have you, especially in a modern situation where like maybe the business owner is the purchaser, not even like with the marketing automation platform like HubSpot or whatever, but like getting down a level into the department or getting down a level into like the team level. How have you seen, and like I imagine like Snowflake's a great example of this, Mongo's a great example of this as well, especially these dev tool companies where you have like an easy in and you get an initial transaction.
Yes.
How does Matic kind of mix with that? Because
you're talking more like PLG type stuff. It doesn't really mix with that. I mean, you can seed the organization through PLG, but you don't really, and self-serve products, but you can't really, you're not really qualifying much if somebody's just picking something off the internet, right? So, and the other difference is
you're not there
versus now is when you had to do 400 or 800 million dollars in sales, guess what? Where you started day one, you didn't start with 400 million in renewals and you were going to add 400 new. You started at zero because it was a perpetual license. You had to go out and sell another 800 million. You know what I mean? Day one.
Yeah. But I think, but I do think, especially because like, there's like the PLG, like someone buys a seat of Zoom or they buy a seat of Slack or what have you. But in a lot of organizations, what ends up happening is you land in there and there are higher ASP, like single player transaction, like Datadog, another like New York / Boston company is a really good example of this, huge world killing organization, and an amazing sales organization as well. But driving that initial transaction, even if it's like a $5,000 transaction or a $10,000 transaction for a small land, still has a lot to be learned from Matic style qualification behaviors.
Where you can really learn is what I would call, let's say if I go into a startup today and somebody says, hey, John, we want to help, your help. Then what happens is most of the times it's founded by a tech CEO and they think that everybody's going to buy their baby tomorrow. But the reality is the product is still evolving. Someday, maybe everybody in the world will buy their product, every company in the world. But today, where's the best fit for their product? So who's the persona? Who's the company? What is the use case? So those types of qualifying those things is really important in trying to aim, your arrows, especially in startups, as to, here's exactly where we will go, where we drive the highest value for the customer. And in return for that, we get the highest monetary value.
Yeah, I feel that that's kind of related to like the future state, because when you have this initial piece of technology, there are some accounts and some customers where like their lay of the land will make it such that your particular solution will drive discontinuous benefit for them. I think one of the challenges though, and we know this like intuitively, or maybe the customer will say it like, oh man, this is amazing, it's changed my life. But oftentimes folks struggle with respect to like actually metrifying that and like characterizing it in a quantitative capacity. I wonder if you have any kind of like recommendations around how organizations can do a better job of showing up and putting a metric around that, even if it's maybe like squishy math. When you have a situation where maybe you don't have like a Forrester total economic impact survey, or like you're not even on Gartner's radar or what have you.
But you have past customers. So if you have history of past customers, a lot of times organizations, when they're first starting, they sell a lot of product. They never go back and actually ask the customer, okay, I sold that product. What was the before state before I sold it? And what's this current state today? And let's do an analysis as, to the before and after. And to your point, tie some metrics around it. So if you have customers and they're using the product, I mean, the best place to go is, and especially if you said you don't have a ton of customers, go back to those customers and analyze, what did it look like before? What does it look like now? Put some metrics together. And there's nothing more powerful than going into a customer you're trying to sell and talk about the use case that they have and say, oh, and it's a great way of drawing information out of them. We happen to have another customer named XYZ that had the same scenario, same exact pain, and here's the after scenario. If you like to speak to them, I can arrange that for you. But did you know that they also had this type of an issue? Have you ever experienced that before? And the customer now opens up and says, oh yeah, of course. And it's because they now know. A lot of times you walk into a customer and they think they're the only ones in the world that experience those problems. And they don't want to share that a lot of times with some salesperson that just showed up. But if you can show that you have knowledge about those use cases and past experience in helping companies similar to theirs and have a similar use case, you can find that they can open up pretty quickly for you.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the importance, especially for early stage organizations where maybe you only have like a handful of customers, a half dozen, couple dozen. It's like, I think new business acquisition really gets lionized, like, oh wow, taking down logos, etc. But if you don't sufficiently invest in those folks and get them to success, and you run ahead to the next thing, you're going to make your life very tough in those conversations if you don't have that.
And here comes the churn, because they're wondering, what was the value? So I bought this stuff from Pete, but what value did I really receive? So if you don't go back and analyze the situation and try to have that information on hand to not only get a renewal, but get an upsell or cross-sell, you're probably going to churn those customers also, especially in the early days.
Yeah, for sure. And this is one
especially now in this environment when things start to get cut, and they go through the budget of all the items on the list. So, hey, Pete, what do you think about this item here? I don't really know. How much value are you getting out of that, Pete? I don't know. Okay, take it off the list. But if Pete, as your champion or the end user that you really want, can say, oh, no, I know exactly what value we're getting out of this. Here's what the situation was previously. Here's what it is now. I got to have this software. Okay, we'll keep that, because not many people are going to give those answers when they're questioned about what value are you getting out of this software today, because we're getting ready to take some off the list.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that it's important for organizations to hold themselves accountable to customer value realization by instrumenting usage, and then also the customers, like, they're not going to record it themselves, the value capture, right?
No.
So you have to record it for them. Yeah, you have to record it for them.
That's the job of a salesperson.
Yeah,
just like they're not going to build a cost justification with a whole business proposal and go into the economic buyer by themselves and say, hey, I think you ought to buy a couple $1 million worth of this software. It doesn't happen.
No, that's our job, right? Like, yeah, literally here at Atrium, we have a thing called a VBO, a verified business outcome. It's a task type in Salesforce. We have a button that sits on the contact object. Literally every time there's like a verified business outcome, the customer success manager logs that. A bunch of like emails and like Slacks go out. Everyone goes, yeah, it's fantastic. And then of course, like, it rolls up at the end of the, at the QBR, at the end of the contract, et cetera. It's like, here's all your verified business outcomes along with all the chorus recordings associated therewith. Here you go, right? And like making sure to reflect that as much as possible to prevent, to make sure that you're not on that the cutting block. Question on, so we were talking about metrics right there. And another thing that I find, actually, I love this about how you're talking about, like, where are we at in the deal? Because I think a lot of, like, some reps kind of have like good situational awareness, right? They kind of know where they're at. And then other ones maybe like less so, right? And and I think one of the things that reps sometimes will get confused over, and sometimes it's just using the words the wrong way, is the difference between a coach and a champion. They're like, oh man, I champion tested this person. Oh yeah, are they a champion? Yeah, they're super pumped about it. They're excited to advocate for the use of Atrium. Hey, are you willing to advocate for Atrium, for your organization to purchase Atrium for you? I sure am. Would you be comfortable saying that even if I wasn't here? Yeah, I would. But even that, like, that's just like that's a good by the way, like that's a reasonable champion test that like a lot of reps might kind of shrink from doing because they don't want to be told no. They're like, oh, what if they tell me they don't love me? But like, how do you really differentiate between a coach and a champion such that you have a lead blocker to take you all the way to the end zone?
Well, this could be a long answer, but
that's
when you look at an organization chart, I always say that there's the org chart and there's the power chart. And the org chart shows the hierarchy of all the different managers in the organization. And just because they're on the organization chart doesn't mean that they have the power, whether that's technical respect that, comes in a form of power in the organization or political power. They don't have the power. And how does that power manifest itself? It manifests itself in the ability to get access to the economic buyer. So these champions, they're really smart in the sense that they have a reputation to uphold inside the organization. And they're not going to blow that reputation on some ill-prepared salesperson that just says, hey, could you be my champion? And, would you sponsor me and get me a meeting with the economic buyer? No. So now I start to think, who is the person that has either domain experience, that's the person with technical respect, or I got to solve a problem because maybe the board has put me in charge of, running a new initiative. I'm going to go find somebody that I know is a riser in the organization, gets things done, and I can put them in charge of that initiative, right? So now what I think about is the power chart shows you not only who has authority, meaning that they're on the org chart, but who has influence. So I'm looking for influence and authority. And what you have to do is you have to earn their respect. You have to earn their trust. You have to build those people up. It's not something that happens overnight and doesn't happen in a, sometimes it can happen over months because they're in the background. They're watching you as you do discovery, you do quantification, you do implication, you're building the plan. They start to say, oh, this guy, Pete, he looks like somebody I'd be willing to attach myself to and take to the economic buyer. Now, if Pete's just speaking features and functions and low-level technology stuff, it's not happening. But if Pete is also able to take that technology aspect and translate it into how it affects the business so that when I take him to the economic buyer, I know that he's going to speak the language of the economic buyer and be fully prepared, So then I'm willing to take the chance of attaching myself, my reputation, my career to Pete and take him to the economic buyer. So a lot of times people aren't asking the right questions. You can ask when somebody's around, hey, if Joe, who's the manager over there, or Sally, if she got hit by a bus today, who would take their spot? You can look in the annual report, you can look in the 10Ks and you can see who's been assigned to special initiatives. You can ask those questions. If you're asking about their business, they have different initiatives in the business. Hey, who are the people that are attached to those? And you start to get these names and you go visit with those people and you actually see and experience what a champion sounds like, looks like, talks like. And you start to say, man, I got to attach myself to more of these people. And guess what? The champions in the organization, they know who the other champions are, because at the end of the day, especially if it's political power, they're their competition. They know who those people are. They know who the movers and shakers are in the organization. And that's your job. Too many people, Pete, they get in an organization, somebody talks to them, somebody likes their product, somebody wants them to win.
You're my guy.
But they're a coach. It doesn't mean that they have any power. So when you get to that meeting where you got to control the criteria, control the process, and there could be the competition's champion in there, who do you know is going to win? Who's going to control that room? So when Joe says something, does everybody go, that's interesting? And then when, Sammy says something, does everybody go, hey, Sammy, sit down. Yeah, sit down for a second.
Oh, man, Sammy. Again,
thanks a lot. Thanks, Sammy.
Again,
you want
again with
product.
the PTC.
Every sales guy that comes in here, you want to buy their product too. Okay, good. Thanks, Sam. You see what I mean? So you have to basically do a lot of homework, a lot of discovery, a lot of intuition to attach yourself to the right champions.
Yeah. And I think there's again, like taking these things that work in, you know, $500,000, $2 million deals, and then like seeing how they can compress and like be sped up. I think the distillation there is like, look, you want to look for the champion who doesn't just have a crush on you, because like, okay, that's great, they like your product. Guess what? Maybe they like lots of products. You know what? Actually, maybe they like going out to lunch and like took them out to lunch or whatever. But you got to find the people who the other folks in the organization think have juice. And so generally speaking, what that's probably going to look like is like, if this person's a goofball and strikes you as a goofball, like they're probably striking other people in the organization as a goofball. And so do you really want to hitch your wagon to their train? The other thing too is that if they probably don't have a lot of tenure in the organization, it might be a little tough there. Now, I think there could probably be exceptions to that situation,
Yeah,
where
there's
maybe somebody's,
exceptions to that. Yeah,
for sure, like somebody's coming in, but like they're like
they
long
brought them
tenured
in
and
to
impressive.
basically run new initiatives. Yes, exactly.
So it's not a disqualifier, right? But it'd be
Right.
one of those things where you might like, you know, the hair on the back of your neck might want to stick up a little bit there. You want to make sure that like, you know, that's something. And so I think what you were saying here is like, hey, is this person excited about your solution, but also are other people going to be excited about them? And
It's
then being
also
honest
the
about
questions
that.
they ask. Like when you're in a meeting with 10 people and some people ask questions, they're very superficial questions. Some people ask questions and they sound like that's the enemy. They're just trying to dislodge you or hope you never sell the product. And then you get some people that ask these super intuitive questions that are not up here, like 4 layers down, and you answer the question and they go 3 layers down underneath that. You're like, wow, who is that?
We need to sidebar.
You know,
we need to get together.
Then they ask from there, they follow up from that tech question into a business question. And you're like, wow, okay, I may want to attach myself to this person. I'm going to have to get their name and follow them down the hallway, or go find a way to, you know, meet with them next time I'm here.
Yeah. Well, so as we're talking about like how to help, you know, how to differentiate between coaches and champions, and like how to, you know, how to make sure that your reps can actually do that. I think this kind of speaks to another thing that I know that you're very passionate about, and certainly we here at Atrium are as well, which is, you know, why do organizations not invest as substantially as they should in management? Because like the manager, like, look, there's only one John McMahon. There's only one John McMahon, right? And so, you know, there's only one CRO. There's only one SVP of sales. And say you got 50 reps, you got 100 reps. Like, it's the same way that as a manager, you can't be a super rep closing all the deals, right? There's no leverage there. As a sales leader, you can't be a super manager managing all the reps. You got to invest in your managers and use them as a source of leverage. And yet organizations don't do it as much as they should. How do you crack that nut? Like, what would you say to organizations about how to develop their managers?
It's the greatest leverage of a dollar that you can find in your organization. Imagine if you can train everyone and they were on, let's say to your point, you had 100 reps and they were only 50K or 100K more productive in the year. 100 times 100. That's a lot of money. Do you think that paid off? And let's say they were already producing $1 million. So you made them 10% better. Now they're producing 1.1 million. So 100,000 times 100 reps. What is that? $10 million? Or yeah, it's $10 million. Yeah. That doesn't pay for the training. I don't understand it. I never understood it, Pete, because I was training my people nonstop. I think it's the greatest leverage that you have as a leader, you know, to get your people to perform, to your point, so that, you know, they're not making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and they're getting better. And the more confident you can make somebody, you know, the more confident they become when they win. And when they win, they develop pride. And when they're proud and they're getting promoted and making money, and they're in an organization that's surrounded with other people that are confident and competent and getting promoted and winning. Yeah, here we go. No one's wants to leave those organizations.
It just spins itself all the way up. Yeah, you just have like this flywheel of awesome that's going there. And I think, yeah, a lot of things that we see with our customers is like, one, you know, a lot of battlefield promoted managers, like first time AE gets promoted to manager, SDR gets promoted to manager. And especially in kind of like, you know, mid-market organizations, a little higher velocity, et cetera. It's kind of one of those things like, oh, I ain't got time for that, you know, management training. We got to close some deals. Ain't got time for that SDR management training.
Stupid. Yeah.
Well, it is, but like you got to have empathy for it as well, because they're just like, oh man, I got to dive in here. And so one of the things that we see is that, like, one, you got to make space for it on the calendar, right? You got to make sure that the managers are spending time doing coaching and like have a good operating rhythm, right? Like that isn't just like, oh, let's do some pipeline reviews here. It's like, hey, here's our pipeline review, and here's our like our coaching one-on-one that has our specific coaching initiatives on a per rep basis, right? And here's the metrics associated with that we're trying to improve. It is making sure that the managers are being trained. You got that first enablement resource in there. Of course, they're working on helping reps with like the disco questions or like objection handles or whatever, versus kind of going up one level and then helping the managers such that they can coach the reps on good discovery questions and good second level questions and good objection handles and what have you. And then the other thing that we see too is that there just isn't as much manager enablement in terms of like tooling and resources. Like sales operations will hand managers, oh yeah, here you go. Here's all the metrics you could possibly need. It's like 20 tiles in a Tableau chart or whatever, versus like the more kind of like tactical things that the managers need in order to manage their business. I think it's changing a little bit, so that's good. But yeah, question for you on discovery, because I think one of the things of I really believe is that deals are won in discovery, and making sure that and of course I quote your book ad nauseum in this regard, is that a lot of times reps think that discovery is about learning about the account, right? Like they are discovering about the account versus revealing to the account or revealing to the person that you're talking with about unmet needs that they may not realize, or the unrealized implications associated with pains that they know that they have, but they haven't quite done the math to figure out exactly how problematic they like those pains are. And of course, your chapter on the insurance salesman calling you was it the box up? Is probably like the most like visceral example of this I've ever seen documented around like really amazing discovery. How do you help reps get better at discovery and get better at like really like dragging the customer through the pain and revealing and teaching, but not through like a kind of like lecturing approach, but more of a questioning approach? How do you get reps better at that?
I mean, I used to ask these simple questions. I used to ask like, well, why do they have to buy? And that question right there can stop reps in their tracks. Tell me why they have to buy. Have to buy. Like the pain is so great that they have to buy. Tell me why. They can't get past it. So they're not doing proper discovery. It's pretty simple. And then if they can get past it, you tell me why they have to buy from us. And then if they get past that, tell me why they have to buy now. Why?
Three whys.
Where's the urgency? Why do they have to buy now? And if they can't answer those three questions, you don't even need to go into things like MedPick or where they are in the sales process. They're really early on in the sales process. And what I always like to do in the sales process was, the first step was discovery. The second step was scoping, which really takes a lot of time. That's where all the time is spent, is in discovery and scoping. And then I put a wall to the economic buyer. Because if you really, going back to the earlier point, are doing a great job in discovery and a great job in scoping, a champion will literally almost find you, right? If you're doing a great job. And then you're able to get access to the economic buyer. So the question becomes really simple sometimes. They say, yeah, I'm doing a great job in discovery and all that stuff. Okay, now, Pete, how long have you been calling on this account? 6 months. You have a champion? Yeah, I have a champion. You sure you have a champion? Yeah. Have you met the economic buyer yet? No, you don't have a champion. You don't have a champion. You're not doing something right in the discovery process. Now let's go back to the 3 whys. Let's figure out if you really understand. And if you don't understand those things, you just haven't done your homework. And if you don't do your homework and proper discovery and scoping, you're not going to find a powerful champion, somebody that's going to get you really high in the organization. And you have to attach yourself, as I say in the book, to a pain that's above the noise. It can't just be a pain that they can solve by, like me, is if I cut my finger right now, okay, I go get a Band-Aid and I wrap it up. That's a pain. But companies have thousands of those pains and they can just work around them. Now, if I fall off my bike separate my shoulder, puncture my, break a rib and puncture my lung, I require third-party attention. So now that's just like a company, like go find the pain that requires third-party attention. That's the pain that's above the noise. That's the pain that the executives want to talk about. They don't want to talk about the fact that you cut your finger. Okay, what are you telling me that for? Tell me about something big, something I didn't know. Bring me that. That's where you're going to find the champions. So you have to think big. You have to think big potatoes. You can't walk in and start talking about your technology and then think that that's going to translate automatically to finding the big pains. You have to think big. What does this organization do? Read the 10K report, read the annual report, find out about their competition, find out about the market that they're in, find out what problems everybody's trying to solve in that market. Go attach yourself to those things. Yeah, think big. Stop thinking small potatoes.
The kind of like a rule of thumb that I try to use with reps is like, why will this person get fired for not fixing this? Or why will somebody get fired?
Great.
Right.
Great.
And like, why will they not be able to raise the next round of funding? Like, I'll give you a good example. One of the kind of key use cases for Atrium, there's just like a half dozen, is making sure that monitoring the ramp of new reps. Right. You just hired a class of 10 new reps, got to get them to productivity, want them to be at full productivity by month 6. What would be the implications associated with like not understanding that like 3 of your 10 weren't coming into band? Well, what would happen? What would happen then? Well, I'd probably be in absolutely deep shit. And moreover, I guess we probably wouldn't hit our ARR goals, which might imperil our next round of funding. Wow, that sounds pretty important to me.
Yeah. Hey,
right. Hit him with the box up.
Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, John, I think we're out of time here. This is absolutely fantastic.
We are. That's it.
All right. Yeah. As I can, as you can tell, like I'm a big fan of everything you talk about in the qualified sales leader, which is why we just give them away like candy, because I think the modern sales, which is the name of the sales community, the sales operations leadership community that I run, is something that is extremely valuable, right? So like salespeople and the sales profession is like the economic grease that connects new innovation to people who need it and like helps advance. Like that's literally how like the world of technology is advanced and like more efficiency and like higher GDP. But like someone's got to make a sale, right? And the more effective those sellers are through better management and through better leadership, the better the whole economic engine will run. And it's actually really, it's a really important thing, which is why we need more folks kind of like beating the drum and making sales organizations more operationally effective. So thank you for all the work that you've done in that regard. And if anybody out there has a former PTC sales leader that they work under, you can thank John, you can blame John for that.
Whatever you want. It's okay with me. I'll still sleep tonight.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, John. Appreciate it. And we'll take care.
Okay. Take care of yourself. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Pete and John. This was awesome. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. We really enjoyed the content. And if you in the audience really like the conversation today, stick around because we have more events coming up today. This is the last day of our summit, and we have an in-person event today in New York City, Austin, and San Francisco. So if you are in one of those cities, make sure you are attending our in-person events. Next up, we have Prospecting Makes Perfect, the secrets behind consistent opportunity creation. That panel is starting at 11 a.m. So make sure you tune in for this next panel, and we would love to see you here. While the panelists and I hang out backstage, I'm going to ask them some questions and talk about how it went. The team at Modern Sales Pros will make sure that the recording will be available on our website pretty soon. And again, you will also receive an email later today with all the recording links and all key takeaways from the presentations. Thank you so much for joining us for this session, and stick around for the next one because I'm pretty sure it's going to be awesome too. I'll see you in a bit, and I hope you enjoy. I'm going to join the